landmark exhibition that helps us to rethink and reorient our whole thinking about early 20th century American art and the influence of Mexican muralists on American artists. We're so pleased also to present Mutualities, which I want to say Mutualité, I don't know why, but this should be Spanish, a solo exhibition by the multidisciplinary artist, filmmaker Colleen Smith, who was featured in a previous biennial. We want to welcome you home, and her work, which is also about kind of a reimagining of the future, which has some consonance with the Vita Americana show. Although the idea for Vita Americana was first proposed over a decade ago by our longtime and celebrated curator, Barbara Haskell, interest in 20th century Mexican art has continued to grow exponentially. As a museum devoted to the art of the United States, Vita Americana provides the Whitney with an unprecedented opportunity to present a new understanding of art history, one that acknowledges the wide-ranging and profound influence that the Mexican muralists had on style, subject matter, and ideology of art in the United States between 1925 and 1945. The exhibition reaffirms our connection to Mexico and its rich cultural traditions and reminds us that the power of art and cultural and artistic influence is not bound by borders. Through their example, the Mexican muralists inspired American artists to create epic narratives about American history and everyday life, and they motivated artists to use their art to protest economic, social, and racial injustices. As you will see, our team at the Whitney has found amazing ways to bring these murals to life, which was not so easy to do, considering it would be very hard to bring all those murals here. I'm excited for you to find new understanding and context for many of the new and familiar and unfamiliar murals. Vita Americana features 200 works by some 60 Mexican and U.S. artists. The show is also traveling to the McNay Art Museum in San Antonio, Texas, where it will be on display this summer and into the early fall. And I just want to acknowledge, and you will hear all the thank yous because they're so deserved, requires such incredible support over many years. And I want to thank the foundations, the corporations, and the many individual donors who have made this possible. In particular, I want to start with our lead foundation, our lead supporter, the Jerome L. Green Foundation, who has been a long-time and steadfast supporter and really understands the importance of presenting shows of art that helps us rethink who we are and where we are at any given time. So thank you to the Green Foundation. I'm also incredibly thankful to the city and Citibanamex, Delta, and Aeromexico for their sponsorship. And bear with me, I have lots of names, but these people deserve the thank yous because otherwise this wouldn't be happening. The Judy Hart Angelo Exhibition Fund, the Barbara Haskell American Fellows Legacy Fund, the Henry Luce Foundation, who is there over and over again for us, the Terra Foundation for American Art, and the Whitney's National Committee. I'd also like to acknowledge the generosity of Mr. and Mrs. Horowitz Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, and we also received significant support from the Arthur F. and Alice E. Adams Charitable Foundation. Our thanks are also to the Garcia Family Foundation, to the Robert Lehman Foundation. It really takes a village. Actually, in this case, I think it took 2 countries. And also, I want to acknowledge the curatorial research and travel came from the Stephen Alexandra Cohen Foundation. And one that I always like to thank is the Wyeth Foundation for American Art that has gotten behind this beautiful catalog, which hopefully you've all seen or will see, which was quite the undertaking and is a wonderful volume presenting lots of new information and materials. But finally, in terms of thanks, I really would like to thank the individual donors there. We had more than 20 individual donors. I've been told that some of them were actually moved to tears, not just about the show itself, but they were moved to tears that the paintings and works in their collection had to leave their homes to come here. That's how precious people feel about these works. It's very, very hard. They're very fragile. A lot of these things had never left Mexico before or very infrequently. And I want to thank you. Some of them are here today, but I just want to thank you because without you, the show would not exist and would not have the richness that it does. I also want to acknowledge there's over 40 different museums from the U.S., and also from Europe, from Mexico, from Argentina, from Japan, that loaned works to this exhibition. And a special thanks to the Secretariat of Culture and the National Institute of Fine Arts and Letters, otherwise known as INBAL, for their support of this exhibition, their assistance with loans of works from both Mexican collectors and other public and private collections. This exhibition has been a major undertaking, and I want to thank our team of curators, led by the one and only Barbara Haskell. The team has tirelessly worked to bring the show to life, and in addition to Barbara, Marcela Guerrero, our assistant curator, both of whom you'll meet shortly this morning, Sarah Humphrevel, our senior curatorial assistant, Alana Hernandez, who is our former curatorial project assistant, and Sophia Silva, our curatorial fellow. As Rivera once said, you have to trust a true compliment as much as a critique. This is a true compliment, so remember that. There are also so many others on the Team Vita Whitney staff: Zoe Triple, Christy Putnam, Anna Martin, Brenna Cothran, Beth Turk, Caitlin Birmingham. This is for the catalog, the registration, the exhibition design, Catherine Potts and Ann Bird for education, Matt Skopek in conservation. It truly takes a village. This show was yours for the last 5 years. Now it is all of your shows. So I want to end by making just a few quick thanks to Colleen Smith. Scott Rothkopf, our chief curator, will talk at length. But Colleen Smith's installation, which is on the 5th floor, which, as I mentioned, is a really nice juxtaposition, is a really transformative, multidisciplinary work that really reflects on memory and shared histories. And you'll see the kind of broader connections to the importance of what's going on in the world today. This exhibition is part of an ongoing exhibition series that we devote to mid-career and emerging artists, and I want to thank Nordstrom, who are at the other end of the High Line, who support our contemporary art shows. It's not something that I would have necessarily connected with them, but they thought it was great to do contemporary art shows, and we're thrilled. I just want to say, after introducing Scott Rothkopf, we're going to change our format. We're going to do a little interview format this morning, together with Barbara Haskell and Marcel Guerrero, to talk about the exhibition. But I would first like to introduce Scott Rothkopf, our chief curator, and also our maestro, who orchestrates everything art in this museum. So thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Good morning, everyone. I promise I will not be talking at length. What you want to hear is following me, but I couldn't resist taking a moment with all of you here to see these two remarkable exhibitions and let you know a little bit about what is coming up this year. As most of you may know, many of you may know, the Whitney turns 90 this year. We were founded in 1930 and we opened our doors to the public in 1931. And we have so many incredible special exhibitions and projects on the horizon this year to honor both our history and the kind of spirit of innovation, I think, that brings us towards the future. Just this season alone, we have, of course, the shows that are opening today, a very beautiful, dreamy show of the artist Agnes Pelton. If you love Hilma af Klint, you'll love Agnes Pelton, Desert Transcendentalist. We have a great show of the young artist Salman Tour, his first solo show in New York City. This summer, an amazing Julie Meritou survey, which we've co-organized with the LA County Museum. It's on view now in LA, and we're really delighted to bring 2 decades of Julie's work here to New York, a show of the Kamange Photography Workshop, and many, many more. Because I promised not to speak at length, I'm only going to talk about 3 things that I want to make sure you know about. One is that this September, we will debut, after something like 5 or 6 years, this incredible public artwork that we think of as something of a gift to New York City by David Hammons. It's called Days End, and here you see a rendering of Pier 52, which, if the screen were not here, would be directly across the street from these windows. We'll have to have a big reveal when we drop the screen, and then you'll see the sculpture, but that will not happen until September. David Hammons, as you all know, I think is one of not just the greatest living American artists, but the greatest living artists anywhere. And he came to see our building downtown just before it opened and found himself peering out across at the water and said, you know, is that where the artist Gordon Matta Clark did this installation called Days End? And in fact, it is where Gordon Matta Clark, in 1975, cut a giant hole in the floor and walls of this dilapidated pier shed just across the water from where we're standing. And Mata Clark, as many of you know, was a very important figure in the downtown art scene, interested in architecture, conceptual art, but also history. The history of a city that was rapidly changing then and is changing even faster today. And you can see what Mata Clark did from the outside and inside of this pier shed. And you can see how this inspired David Hammonds to send us in the mail a little sketch that looked something like this. This was back in 2014, and Adam and I were a little perplexed as to what this meant. Was it just a drawing, a thank you, an idea, a provocation, a dream? We chose to take it a little bit as all of those things and invited him to begin this journey with us to create this really singular public artwork. We're very grateful to all our friends at the Hudson River Park Trust, where this sculpture will sort of reside alongside the pier, and to many people who helped make it possible. So just so you know, this summer we'll pave the way with a show in our lobby gallery from our collection called Around Day's End, which is about works made in New York in the period around Mata Clark's original work. And then in the fall, in September, we'll unveil this piece to the public and also have a block party celebrating our 5th anniversary in our new building, our 90th anniversary as a museum, and the completion of David's remarkable project. Also that fall, we will be premiering another major exhibition or project, which I am co-curating with Carlos Basualdo at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which is a Jasper Johns retrospective, the first on the East Coast in nearly 25 years, and certainly the most comprehensive ever in the career of this artist, who, it so happens, is also turning 90 this year. This is not a theme of birthdays on May 15th. So we'll be celebrating Jasper's 90th year at the Whitney, an artist who is so important to us, actually remembers coming to the very first Whitney on 8th Street and has seen all 4 Whitney museums, someone who we have more than 200 works of in the collection and is truly one of the greatest artists of our time, of the 20th century, and I think today. The show will trace his work from 1954 to the present, some works that might not even be finished yet, at both the Philadelphia Museum and the Whitney as a 2-part complementary exhibition that is sort of based on the idea of the mirror or the double, which is such an important motif in Johns' art. So you'll see works like the 3 Flags and the Racing Thoughts, which are icons of our collection, but more than 500 other works in every medium: sculpture, printmaking, pastel, drawings, everything you could imagine. And it's going to be a really remarkable testament to this artist's work, but also the spirit of collaboration between the Philadelphia Museum of Art and the Whitney. We're hoping to really join hands with our City of Brotherly Love just down the way, and maybe some of you will even be inspired to go back and forth through the Holland Tunnel or on an Amtrak to see the shows both in one day. Last but certainly not least, I do want to add my thanks to Adams, to Colleen Smith. Colleen, you have a special place in my heart at the Whitney because you not only were in the first biennial that happened in this building, and my first as chief curator, but you actually inaugurated that biennial. You walked in the door and encountered Colleen's banners, really challenging us, inspiring us, and I remember following you up the High Line with your banners when you took them out of the show, which is not so common. We don't love artists that take works out of the show and process with them on the High Line, but we did, and I would follow you anywhere, Colleen. So I'll follow you back up to the 5th floor where she and the curator of the exhibition, Chrissy Isles, will be talking about this show, Mutualities, which presents 2 recent acquisitions, films of Colleen's, Pilgrim and Sojourner, that, as Adam mentioned, have this kind of interesting reimagining of Black cultural and spiritual history in a way to think about the past, but also in relation to the present, bringing together figures from Sojourner Truth to the composer Alice Coltrane, and spiritual leader, I should say, as well as a suite of new drawings that I think are being premiered, actually, for the first time in public. I'm getting a nod. So please don't miss Colleen's show. Thank you, Chrissy and Clémence, the curators. And it is now my great honor to welcome Barbara Haskell, first and foremost, back to the stage. Barbara, as Adam said, has been working on this show for a very long time, and I think it's really a true testament to her scholarship and to hopefully the best ideals of the museum as we continue to look hard at American art history and hopefully tell more complex and interesting tales. I also want to acknowledge Marcela Guerro, who will be joining her, assistant curator, and thanks to Sarah Humphreyville, curatorial assistant, who worked on this show. So without any further ado, please join me. What? Oh, there's a video before you come back. Sorry, I clearly didn't follow any notes. Who knows if anything I said is correct, but we have a great 90th year ahead, and I hope to see you many times throughout 2020. And now, the video.
This exhibition is really rewriting art history. There's been the common assumption that the French were the influence on American art during the first half of the 20th century. Vida Americana changes that narrative to show that it was the Mexican artist that had the most profound, pervasive influence on the art of this country.
I like to say that if it weren't for people like Orozco and eventually Siqueiros, we wouldn't have the Jackson Pollock that we all know and love.
That makes for a fun entry, doesn't it? Anyway, I'm going to start off with saying, what took so long? You started thinking about this show 15 years ago.
So what initially drew me to the whole idea of looking at Mexican art was when I began looking at the cultural renaissance that occurred in Mexico at the end of that country's revolution, and began to notice similarities between artists like Rivera and Thomas Hart Benton, the way they handled history as an epic, socially moving document. And it was then 4 years ago, thanks to you, that the exhibition was scheduled, and we began jumping into the research in earnest.
And do you think it's really a revolutionary idea to be thinking about the influences coming from south to north as opposed to east to west?
I do. I think, as I said in the video, that for so long, those of us who studied art history have been taught that it was the French that dominated American art in the 20th century. And this exhibition really rewrites that narrative. I think that one of the things that happened after World War II that we discovered is with the rise and the hegemony of abstraction, the fear of communism that overtook all of America, and the connection between nationalism and fascist Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. The Mexicans were in a way, if not discredited, at least marginalized in some sense. And now we're in an era where artists are once again looking at political and social issues and wanting to engage in a public way in pressing issues of life. And I think the Mexican muralists can once again provide a model that's really critical for us now.
That's interesting. I mean, the Whitney did have a foray in its early days into looking at Mexican murals. Can you say a word about that?
Right, it did. It showed Orozco. Juliana Force, the director at the time, purchased Orozco's work. We showed artists that, some of the other Mexican artists. We never showed Rivera. We never showed Siqueiros, though. They were almost too radical for the Whitney, I think. Orozco at the time seemed maybe more palatable, but then we went on to other things, and it was a very short window in which we supported the Mexican muralists.
Now, the influence is not just stylistic, but it's also in terms of content. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the style, all of you will see when you go upstairs, the style is pervasive. So artists responded in different ways to all three of the leading Mexican muralists and channeled their styles into their own expressions. But in terms of subject matter, absolutely there was an influence. Not only this sense of describing history in this epic way, the whole idea about how to depict the fight against oppression and injustice is very telling. And I think basically, though, the subtext is the ideology that art is public, that art can be modern, that it can be visually powerful, and yet at the same time tell stories about everyday life and history that are relevant to people, everyday people, not just the elite and the wealthy, but tell them in a style that's accessible to the public.
Marcela, can you talk, I mean, Siqueiros is one of your favorites.
Yes.
And can you talk about why and also the difference maybe in how Siqueiros may have approached it to Rivera and Orozco, and then maybe say a word about the LA mural, which we have reproduced, and the importance of that?
Yeah. So Siqueiros was the youngest of the three and the one to come in 1932. He came for the first time to LA. Actually, before I jump in straight to Siqueiros, let me say a word about these two images that we have here, because one thing that was a little bit of a challenge for us, as you can imagine, is how to represent murals that are frescoes that are in situ. And so we also wanted to give our audience diversity of experiences when it came to how to reproduce these murals. So for each of the big three, we have reproductions from high resolution images. So we have one for the Orozco, like the one you can see here, which we've even recreated the arch the way it is at the dining hall at Pomona College. And we have one for Rivera, and we have one for Siqueiros. In the case of Rivera, there's a funny anecdote because when we were thinking of how to represent the Detroit Institute of Art mural, that one, I remember we struggled for some weeks, and it wasn't until our amazing exhibition coordinator, Zoe Tipple, that she was Googling in the middle of the night, just Diego Rivera, Detroit Institute of Art murals, and she came across these panoramic photographs, 360 degrees photographs by this amazing man, Dave Mariotti from Detroit, shout out to him. And he allowed us to use these images. And so when you go upstairs, you're going to see a beautiful panoramic, animated, spherical, it has a bunch of words, video of the murals. You can also zoom in and the iPads. So a similar thing happened with the case of Siqueiros and America Tropical. And as you said, I'm a huge fan. This mural has an amazing story behind it because he was... when he arrived in LA in 1932, one of the commissions that he received was to paint in downtown Los Angeles on Olvera Street. The assignment was, and I quote, a continent full of happy men and palm trees. And Adam, guess what he painted? He did.
I can't guess.
He did not paint that. He, in the middle of the night, with his block of mural painters, the way he called them, he painted this really brutal image, which was an indictment of American imperialism. There's an American eagle perched on top of this figure, and so this is the Siqueiros, the strident political Siqueiros that you're gonna get to see in Vida Americana.
So, Barbara, maybe say a little bit of a word about, there are a number of works by Japanese artists in this, and also the Mexican muralists had a tremendous amount of influence on African-American artists and painters like Charles White. There's a major mural, which I think one of the great treasures of the show.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that so kind of mesmerized American artists was this idea that art could really express issues of injustice and oppression. And the trajectory that the Mexicans expressed in their own murals from oppression to resistance to liberation was very much taken up and inspired artists, African-American artists like Charles White, whose mural you'll see upstairs. Hale Woodruff, again, his mural is upstairs in the exhibition. Aaron Douglas, they were a real role model, and many African American artists went to Mexico to work with the muralists, and then worked with them when they came here.
And I have to go back. I love Siqueiros. So, can you talk a little bit about Jackson Pollock and his relationship to Siqueiros and the various experiments he did on Union Square? And actually, like Colleen Smith, he did his own parade as well, Siqueiros, which I think Pollock contributed to being in the parade.
That's right. So Pollock is an interesting example of an American artist being influenced by the Mexican muralists, because as Marcela said in the video, he looked at Prometheus. He visited the mural at Pomona College in 1930, and he proclaimed it the best painting in the Western Hemisphere. He kept an image of it in his studio throughout the 1930s. And upstairs you'll see him channeling Orozco's sort of visceral brushstroke and portrayal of struggle and trauma. But at the same time, then in 1936, he was in New York. Siqueiros had come back to the city in order to participate in the American Artists Congress, and he started what he called the experimental workshop. Siqueiros was somebody who believed revolutionary art had to be revolutionary in technique as well as in subject matter. So he was very experimental, using airbrush and splattering of paint and projections, all kinds of new techniques. And one of the things they did in the workshop was to lay canvas on the floor, for example, and throw paint on it, splatter it, pour paint on it. The idea of liberating artists from the confines of old-fashioned techniques. Pollock was a member of the workshop. He was, in fact, one of the 3 artists that Siqueiros wrote to when he left to join the Spanish Republican Army in the Spanish Civil War. So that Pollock was very much a part of the workshop, and I think in a certain way he wasn't. Harold Bloom has a phrase called the anxiety of influence, and I think in some ways Pollock never mentioned Siqueiros as being a major influence. Other people around him did, and said that this experience of working with an artist that was so liberated in terms of technique was something that really led to Pollock's drip paintings in 1947.
I mean, Pollock definitely had problems with anxiety of influence. He never liked to credit anybody. And actually, when you go and you see the painting there, you see how much he learned from those artists. And actually, his painting from MoMA, I forget the name of the very small one there, it's heartbreakingly beautiful. But you see how much he got from Siqueiros, which is really amazing. Marcella, you want to say a little bit about the programs and other interpretive activities related to the show?
Yes. So, as you know, Adam, our education department.
Yes, Marcella.
Yes. Our education department is larger than life. They are amazing, and so as a way to amplify the reach of Vida Americana, we're offering several things. So, for example, for the 3rd time, we're going to offer bilingual didactics, English and Spanish, so everyone can read all of the materials in the gallery, in the exhibition, in both languages. But we're also offering the mobile guide, which we had done before in Spanish. We are giving tours which we've been doing since 2016, but now we're doing 3 times a week bilingual tours in Spanish. We also have a family guide, which you can see here for the first time. That's going to be bilingual. It's going to be free of cost for families and students who come to the museum. And then a bunch of really exciting events. We have tours for immigrant families. We have a teen night on March 6th. We have a symposium on April 3rd, Family Day, March 21st, Immigrant Justice Night on April 29th. Just check the website because there are so many exciting events, and I'm really proud to be showing all of these bilingual materials for our audiences.
Okay, last question for both of you. Why does it matter? Why does it now? Why is it important to come and see the show?
Well, I think for 2 reasons. One, those of us working on the show, it was thrilling to see the work coming into the galleries. And there's something different from seeing an object here, an object there, that the assembly of these objects was so amazing and powerful, intense, that it almost recreated the exhilaration that American artists must have felt when they first encountered the art of the Mexican muralist. So that on one hand is just a thrilling collection of work that one, and as you say, one will never see this work again. These juxtapositions are being seen really for the first and only time. And then the other thing, I think there is this idea that art is public, that it has a social responsibility to play a role in everyday people's lives, that it's not a commodity for the rich and famous, but it's really for everyday people like all of us. And that's a strong message that resonates now as strongly as it did 80 years ago.
Marcella?
Yeah, to echo some of the things that Barbara has said before, I think one thing that this exhibition shows is that sometimes we talk about American art or Mexican art, but these are really fictitious borders, frontiers that do not actually exist. There's always dialogue in art, there's cross-pollination, there's cross-cultural references, and I think that is one of the most evident things that this exhibition will show.
So I just want to end by thanking the two of you, because I think what you're referring to, Barbara, about bringing things together, shows like this only happen when you bring people together to make it happen. I want to congratulate your collaboration along with Sarah Charlesworth, but I also want to thank the entire staff of the Whitney, because it's everybody's collective efforts that help to make that larger vision really palpable and real and experiential. So thank you, and thank you all for being here today.